What's going on, Facebook?
Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. You are listening to, you are watching, you are witnessing humanity in the headlines. Thank you so much for joining us this week. I am your host, Atiba Buchanan, here in Broadview, Illinois, with my good man, lifelong friend, confidant, buddy, pal, David Seaton. How you doing, man?
What's going on, man?
You know, it's just a great week, man. I'm glad to be here. Still loving this weather.
Very much so. It'll be 80s, back in the 80s on Monday and Tuesday here.
Yeah, no. But I
In
like the fall
October.
weather too, though. See, I like wearing my sweaters.
It's October.
I know. It's crazy. So, but nonetheless, I'm appreciative of the weather we have. And I'm, again, very glad to be here. As always, my good friend, time is against us. Definitely have enough time, though, to say thank you to all the folks that are watching on Facebook Live, that are listening on Intellectual Radio, on YouTube, that are watching. We thank you so much. And anyone on iHeartRadio that's giving a listen to the show. We're going to do our best to really bring it today. So let's give the good people a kind of an outline of what we're looking at today, Dave. We're gonna give you something that a lot of news outlets have really forgotten about. As a matter of fact, we're calling this segment "The Forgotten Flint." We're going to do an update on the Flint water crisis today. Flint has been dealing with dirty water now, not just dirty water, but literally
Lead
poisonous
contaminated.
water,
Right.
contaminated, poisonous water now for the better part of 3 years. I have a lot of thoughts on that I'll save for the segment, but needless to say, we are going to talk about that today to remind everyone of the good citizens of Flint, what they are still enduring and going through. Joining us for that conversation will be Miss Monique Judge. She is a contributor writer for The Root. She actually wrote a very recent piece concerning the recent updates as to the status of Flint and what they're going through. So she's going to be joining us today in just a few minutes. And then later on in the show, I'm really excited about this piece, not just in the substance of what we're talking about, but the guests that we've been able to procure for it. We're going to basically deconstruct this whole false narrative of the military having something that they've really never asked for, which is a monopoly on patriotism. And we're gonna break that down a little bit to talk about what real patriotism looks like, and we're also going to talk about, since there's been so much talk about respect for the veterans and all this thing and all this that Republicans and conservatives have used in this conversation concerning the NFL. I'm tired of them being used as props. Veterans are not props, and we're going to talk about, if you really want to support veterans, some of the best ways that you can do it. And joining us for that conversation will be none other than Chicago's own, the governor of Chicago radio, Mr. Cliff Kelly. So he's a veteran himself, by the way, for anyone wondering. He was in the Air Force. I cannot wait to have that conversation with him later today.
Really quick, we'd be remiss without sending a shout out to the people of Puerto Rico.
Absolutely. And if we have time, I'd like to end with a few thoughts on that as well.
Really quickly, just before we get too deep into the show, the Donald Trump, and I'm careful not to call him president.
Right.
I can't bring myself to do it. But he tweeted this morning, such poor leadership ability by the mayor of San Juan and others in Puerto Rico who are not able to get their workers to help. They want everything to be done for them when it should be a community effort. 10,000 federal workers now on island doing a fantastic job. If nothing else, that tweet alone is demonstrative of why we should not get rid of the estate tax. Because Donald Trump was born into money. He's lived in this insular bubble where he's never had to really struggle for anything. And now that he is in the Oval Office, he is so completely disconnected from what average Americans go through, let alone the people of Puerto Rico. We have to come together as a country and make a decision about not putting billionaires and people from private industry who have no governmental experience in charge of government. That does not work.
Yes, we should really be concerned about not becoming an oligarchy.
Right. Right.
I hear you loud and clear. So with that said, we will come back to Puerto Rico. I promise you, we're going to keep things moving. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we talk to Monique Judge concerning the Flint water crisis. Thank you for watching Humanity in the Headlines. We are back on Humanity in the Headlines. So
really quickly, I've got to get a copy of that track, Earl. Earl is just in here killing it with this jazz, man. He is
absolutely. So with that said, we'd like to get into our next segment that we're calling the Forgotten Flint. And let me just give you some of my to tell you why this is such a near and dear story for me. I'm not from Michigan. I'm not from Flint. None of that. I've never had to deal with dirty water. I'm from Chicago. Chicago actually has some of the best drinking tap water in the country. Always has. Not to say that it doesn't have its issues, but again, it's, I've never really had a major issue with drinking water. I say this just as a person and as a human who loves other people and who loves this country. Flint was such a shock for me because I honestly didn't know something like that could happen in the 21st century in this country.
right.
I didn't know people in this country, the richest country in the world, had dirty, contaminated drinking water.
Right.
To have something like that could affect them for generations.
Right.
So the Flint crisis it was such a wake-up call for me. It was so jarring to me because it busted my bubble. I was like, wait, that can happen here? And if something like that did happen here, I certainly thought within a relative snap of a finger that America would fix it and repair it and restore it right away.
Americans come together when there's a crisis.
Right. Fast forward three years and some odd months later, these people are still in the same situation. And we've had a lot going on, justifiably so, especially since November the 8th, that, could kind of justify forgetting about Flint, but we can't really justify forgetting about Flint. So today we're going to talk about it. And joining us for this conversation is a writer for The Root, Miss Monique Judge. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Oh, we are so excellent. We thank you for joining us on today, taking time out of your busy schedule. Again, the weather is great here in Chicago. I'm sure you are enjoying wherever you are as well. So again, we just want to acknowledge that, again, we appreciate your time today. So thank you so much. With that said,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that said, Ms. Judge, you had written a piece for The Root recently where you basically give an update as to what is going on with Flint. This was back on August 3rd of this year. And if you could just kind of give us a framework of kind of what you saw in your reporting and what you know about what's going on currently in the city of Flint, that this has not been rectified yet.
So first of all, it's been over 3 years since the people of Flint have had clean water coming from their faucets. And the problem is, number one, we have to look at this like it's environmental racism. 40% of the people that live in Flint live below the poverty level, so they don't have access. There's been all kinds of back and forth. You know, when this started, initially they didn't tell the people what was going on. But there was a doctor, a pediatrician, in fact, who noticed the problem. She started doing tests on some of the children and found out that the children who lived in the areas with the highest concentration of lead poisoning in the water had higher elevated levels of lead in their blood. And this is a problem for children, you know, when they're developing this stuff, it stunts their growth. Their brains are developing, their internal systems are developing, and the lead poisoning has an impact on all of that. It has an impact on their long-term growth, and it also impacts adults in a negative way. So the fact that she had to do a press conference and put this research out to get the state and other officials to finally say, okay, yeah, there's a problem, is a problem. And so with that, right now they're saying, okay, well, you know, the lead levels in the water are a lot lower, much lower than what they were before, and even maybe below the standard that would say, okay, this is a crisis. But because they're now going in and replacing all of the pipes in the city, that still gives the potential for people to be exposed to even more lead. So the people are still having to use water filters, still having to get bottled water, which another article that I wrote, you know, the state and the city went back and forth about, you know, a judge said that they had to deliver the water to the people. The state and the city both said, oh, no, this is a hardship for us. We can't do that. It's too much work. We can't afford it. You know, and a lot of these people don't have cars. They can't go to a location and get the water. So you're penalizing them for something that they have no control over. And that's where we are with it right now.
Monique, this is David Seaton again. Thank you for joining us and talking about this topic. As I'm listening to you speak, and I heard you say environmental racism. That blew me away. But let me play devil's advocate really quickly and say what the average person on the other end of the ideological spectrum would say. Why are you playing the race card? Why is this about race? Isn't this really just about, hey, you know, if you paid your water bill, then there'd be enough money in the till to take care of these types of issues?
And I would say to that person, no. Because, again, this is an issue that impacts mostly our underserved populations, and that is minority populations. If this were happening in, say, New York City, Manhattan, they would fix it right away. It would not have gone on this long. Or even, I live in Los Angeles. If this was something else going on in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, they would fix it right away. But here we're talking about a population of people, again, who are living well below the national poverty level, who are underserved, underrepresented, and now they are victims, basically, of a system of bureaucracy that's kind of like impeding them being able to get help and get clean water. There's no reason this should have gone on for 3 years. And even with them trying to come up with ways to rectify it, and, you know, the EPA giving them money so that they can fix it, even with that, they made the city jump through hoops so they can get the money. Like, everything is a game. And in the meantime, the people of Flint are suffering.
And we don't even have to go to New York or Los Angeles or go far away. We can stay right there in Flint and say something like this wouldn't happen in Bloomfield Hills, which is
Right.
an upscale suburb of Detroit.
Right. That's exactly right.
So this
is a problem.
What part did the emergency managers in the state of Michigan play? Because some people have been taken to court, and I've been following this story, but not as much. But I do know that some people were at least charged, but it didn't go up to the level of the governor, which is actually ultimately the person who has to take responsibility, right?
That's correct. And so you have now a situation where, again, like I said, there's all this infighting, the state suing the city because they won't, the mayor there won't agree to the water contract that they want her to agree to. So, and it's all of this is happening. All these government officials are getting away. They took the people to court, the emergency managers and some of the people who were involved in it. So there have been some convictions. They even made one lady write a letter and apologize to the people of Flint. But that's not enough. None of that is bringing these people clean drinking water. None of this fighting is they can't get clean water out of their taps. And you have to think about this. We use water to cook. We use water to drink. We use water to bathe. So these people are getting all kinds of different bacterial infections also because they're scared to use the water to even do something as simple as wash their hands. And if you search the root, my articles, I've hashtagged every single one of them with Flint. I've been working on this story for over a year now. There's been so much that has happened with these people. They're Legionnaire's disease, so many bad things have happened to these people, and still here we are. We're moving closer to 4 years now, right? It's October tomorrow. So in April, it will be 4 years. And they still don't have clean water. That makes no sense. Absolutely none.
It makes absolutely no sense. And again, the story it hurts my feelings as I feel for these people, but it also infuriates me. And this is Atiba, by the way. Again, because I wasn't being, that wasn't hyperbole. This story really bursted my bubble. I didn't recognize, again, there's poor. I know that there are poor people in the country, but I thought that the baseline of poor in this country was clean drinking water, plumbing, heat, air conditioning, and then maybe you had to eat from the dollar menu at McDonald's every day. This kind of thing, again, I thought did not happen in this country. This is a third world problem, and we are not a rich country. We are the richest country in the world. What does it say then about America and its mindset of its citizens and the equal treatment of its citizens with this situation in Flint to you?
It says that they don't care about us. You think about this. So the people in Flint have water that they cannot use. The city still expected them to pay their water bills. There were some people who didn't pay water bills. So earlier this year, the city sent them notices and said, if you don't pay this water bill, we're going to issue a lien on your home.
Now, I did notice, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I did notice in your piece that you cited that the Environmental Protection Agency announced Tuesday that it will forgive $20.7 million in water debt.
Yes, for the city, right? Which that's fine. And the city did actually come back and say, after they got called out on it, they came back and said, okay, never mind, we won't put liens on your home. But you have to think about the fact that was even a thing in the first place, right? You guys have not even fixed the problem. They're talking about making a movie about this situation with Queen Latifah and I want to say Jill Scott, a bunch of other people. How is that movie going to end? We don't even know the ending right now because nobody cares.
Wow.
This is still an ongoing issue. There's still all this bureaucratic infighting back and forth. We're going to take this water contract. No, we're going to take this one. And in the meantime, the people are suffering. And so what that says is that our government cares more about government than it does about the people. It's not, we're supposed to be a government of the people, for the people, by the people, whatever the saying is, that is a lie because it's not.
Absolutely.
People are still suffering. They still don't have clean water.
And Rick Snyder, that's the governor in Michigan, right?
Yes.
Right. And he came from private industry, correct?
I'm not sure what his background is, to be honest with you.
But
he has a whole lot of issues himself. So
right, and we were talking about that in terms of what's going on in Puerto Rico, which is kind of the same thing. But ultimately, from the outside looking in, this just seems like another example of someone who was brought from the private sector into the public sector, and they're trying to run government like they run a business. And you can't do that because when you're in charge of the public sector, when you're a governor, a mayor, a president, your bottom line, your product is people. So when you ignore people having fundamental access to, like you just said a moment ago, clean drinking water that you bathe in and wash your clothes in, that you make a financial decision about whether to correct that problem. That's the way you handle things in the private sector, but we can't. We have to come together as Americans and just stand up and say we cannot allow people from the private sector to run government in the same way.
Right. That's absolutely right. Because again, this isn't even isolated just in Flint. There's a city, St. Joseph, Louisiana. If you watch the show Queen Sugar, it's that city that the show is based in. And they also have the same problem. And here is, again, another town full of minorities. Like this is, it can't go unnoticed who is not being served in these situations.
So what are we looking at?
Black and brown people.
From a generational standpoint, how long do you think that the people of Flint will be feeling the effects then of this water crisis?
They're going to go on for because a lot of these people are children. So there were mothers who were pregnant, who had issues with their pregnancies, and the babies were born with issues. There are children who were exposed to that water long before it was even revealed to them that the water was poisoned. So a good thing that's happening there, and I also wrote about this, is the pediatrician who kind of broke the seal on this and let everyone know what's going on. She's now in charge of a program that's tracking all these children, tracking the families, and will continue to track them for years and make sure that they're okay, that they're getting the services that they need to help them overcome the complications that they're going to encounter because of this exposure to lead.
Are you then aware of any type of either state or federal assistance, some type of settlement that may be set aside for these people to help them in the years to come?
There are some lawsuits that have been filed that are still going through the courts now by some of the residents. There have been grants given to Michigan State University, to Dr. Mona Hanna-Tisha, the pediatrician that I referenced. That's the grant is actually funding her program. And so, you know, there is some aid, but it's definitely not enough. And the city got the money from the Environmental Protection Agency, but again, like I said, they had to kind of jump through hoops and basically go through the state to get the money, where the state is what caused the problem in the first place, right?
Right, because they're still bickering among themselves.
It's like it's really just a never-ending circle of BS.
Right, of ineptitude.
Well, you know what, Monique, we could talk about this all day. We're definitely going to have you back to continue this conversation. To everybody who's listening and following, follow The Root. Monique, tell people how they can follow you. I just followed you on Twitter, by the way, but how can people find you and how can they follow you?
So you can follow me on Twitter. Definitely. I am at The Journalista on Twitter. I write news every day for theroot.com. If you want to read everything that I've written about the Flint crisis, if you just go to Google and type The Root and then the hashtag Flint, all the stories that I've written will come up. Because again, I've been covering this for over a year, and it's something that really needs to continue to be in the national conversation.
So everybody who's listening, Google, say that one more time.
The Root. So Google The Root.
The Root.
Along with the hashtag Flint. The
Root hashtag Flint, because we need the clicks and we need the eyes on this so we can make sure that this story doesn't fade into obscurity. Monique, we're going to definitely have you back. Thank you for joining us today, and we will be in touch.
We also thank you for your work on this.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You have a great weekend. Thank you for joining us today.
You as well.
Take care.
So once again, it's always a coincidence, like she said, whenever issues like this happen and you go on the ground and you look at the people who are being impacted, they almost always are Black and brown people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something has to be done about it. But I mean, this is where we are in 2017. This is where we are. And I'm glad that we're in a space now that these things can be talked about in such a robust way, and the information can be shared so quickly and so massively. So
for those of you who are watching, please share the show. We want to get this story out, and we definitely don't want you to miss our next segment.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we are going to talk about what real veteran support and patriotism looks like with none other than Chicago's own Cliff Kelly. We'll be right back. We are back on Humanity in the Headlines. I'm your host, Atiba Buchanan, joined and flanked by my good man, Mr. David Seaton. And we're going to, kind of take our time with this one because we got a really special guest today. Let me give our listeners just a little bit of background. I just want to be completely transparent about this. So joining us today is someone that I admire greatly. His name is Cliff Kelly, otherwise known as the governor of Chicago radio. And he is a staple, a fixture currently and for a long time at WVON. I interned for this man back in 2013, and it was just an honor and a privilege to do so. I mean, everything that we do once a week on Saturdays, we had to do for him every week, every day. And when I tell you, you have not seen a fast-paced environment, man, it was, I mean, those were the good old days for me. But beyond that, even something you didn't know, Dave, I'm going to tell you and Earl something that you guys didn't know. So when we open the show and I say, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, that's kind of a nod to Cliff, because he always opens his show with hello, hello, hello. And so it's kind of a thing that I took from him, but I don't, he didn't even know that, but I know you guys didn't know that. But so it's kind of a nod that I give him every week when I do that. So Mr. Kelly, we are so glad that you are with us today. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing fine, and thank you for those compliments, but I don't want people to not understand. We learn from each other, all right?
There it is.
You yes, absolutely. You were great when you were there, and we had a lot of good times.
Yes, we did, and we tackled a lot of stuff and we handled our business. So again, I'm so glad that you're with us today. So we'd like to have this conversation today, and we're trying to do two things.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that we're trying to do is debunk this false narrative that the military somehow has a monopoly on patriotism and the flag, and that's not something that the military has ever that veterans have ever asked for, by the way. But I'd like to kind of to debunk that theory that patriotism is somehow solely exclusive to the military. That's not to say that we don't honor our veterans, because we do, and we love and respect our veterans. But being a veteran is not the only way to be patriotic. Am I wrong in that assessment?
No, you are totally correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, it's the timing of this is really great, because at 4:00 today, I will be hosting a show called America's Heroes Group. I am a veteran, and we started this show a little over a year ago now. Well, about a year and 3-4 months, and we started it because of the fact of how veterans have been treated in this country. If we have such great respect for them, why does it take 6 months to get an appointment to go to a VA hospital when you need help? Why do we have over 20 veterans a day committing suicide because of PTSD if we have such great respect for these individuals? That's why we started the show, which, as I said, will be on VON from 4 to 5. We do it every Saturday. Our board of directors, and the group, we do things for veterans. Our group leader is a former colonel, combat colonel. He's a physician, Dr. Arnold, Damon Arnold, who used to be a head of the Illinois Department of Health, so he knows exactly what. We have people calling in. We did get to talk to people in the VA, so we've been able to do a lot of things. You're totally correct. It has nothing to do with disrespecting veterans, nothing at all. What Kaepernick did, and I'm just sorry it's gotten so lost with all of this false narrative, as you put it, had nothing to do with soldiers. It's got to do with the people who are disrespected under this flag. For 86 years, this same flag flew over slavery. There's a lot of questions about the flag. The thing that people need to talk about, we just, as you probably know, Illinois, the General Assembly did something right. My old saying, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And this was great, because shouldn't have had to do this, but they did it, and I'm glad they did it, and I got involved in it. Now you have to take civics to graduate from high school. when I was in high school, back when the earth was cooling, you had to take it anyway.
Right.
You know, you had civics and you had a Constitution exam. For some reason, they stopped that. I don't know why, but, you know, some of the legislators, we talk quite often, and they said, you know, Cliff, we need to do this. And I said, yeah. So we all got together and helped. So now it's passed. But it never should have been. You know, people need to know civics. And this is very important. And what we have here, even if you knew civics, and those who respect the flag and so forth, which I certainly do, but you also have a right to burn it. You can burn the flag. The U.S. Supreme Court voted for that 5-4. 5-4. And funny enough, Trump's main guy that he liked so much on the U.S. Supreme Court was Scalia, as you know, extremely conservative. Scalia was the vote that put that over. He was the fifth vote that said, yes, I don't like it, but you can do it under the First Amendment. So this whole thing has gotten, and what Kaepernick was trying to talk about, and so many other folks are doing it now, even high school students, are trying to respect people who are not treated correctly in this country, which is, we all know, is still being done. When you've got here in Chicago, 2 policemen kneeling, taking the kneel with fist up, with a young lady who is one of the activists, you know, this is the sort of thing we're talking about. When your policemen can understand that, when a lot of other people can understand it, you know, Kaepernick wasn't talking about the flag. Kaepernick was talking about the fact people being mistreated. He was talking about policemen shooting and asking questions afterwards. We've got a lot of problems in this country. Even the gentleman who is the superintendent of the Air Force Academy, you probably saw this yesterday, United States Air Force Academy, 3-star general is the superintendent, Air Force general. There was some racist comments written down on something in the academy.
Right.
He said, yeah. So you said, if you're a racist, get the hell out of here.
Right.
So this whole thing talking about, you know, it's taken on something that it's very important. As I said, I'm a veteran. I respect the flag, but I also respect the fact that if you want to demonstrate, and certainly playing the national anthem, if you want to kneel, I got no problem with that at all. I don't feel disrespected. And as a veteran or as a citizen, and in fact, I haven't had the opportunity to do that. I don't know what I would do if I was in that. I think I would kneel, because I know what people are going through. I know what the soldiers are going through, the vets are going through, the problems they're having. So it's just, and then for Trump to come out and say what he's saying, the NFL players kneeling during the national anthem, fire the SOBs. He doesn't know a damn thing about the Constitution. Although
and doesn't care to know.
Uphold it.
Right.
I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
No, Cliff Kelly, this is David Seaton again. Thank you for joining us. And here's the thing that I've posted this a lot. And every time I post it, I get at least a couple of people who respond who didn't know it. But even when Trump is trying to conflate the flag and the national anthem and the soldiers and patriotism and kneeling and that being disrespectful, there's a quatrain in the 3rd verse of our national anthem that says, "No refuge could save the hireling or slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave." So even if African Americans wanted to protest the national anthem, that those words in the national anthem give us enough grounds to do so, notwithstanding the fact that, as you so aptly pointed out, that wasn't what Colin Kaepernick was talking about when he originally kneeled. So I guess my question is, and maybe this is rhetorical, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We're always told we're protesting the wrong way, at the wrong time, in the wrong venue. When, where, and how should we protest, and that we will get the affirmation from the majority?
That's a great question, and I think the fact that this might start that. This is a good thing. It can be a good thing if it can be turned around. At least it gets into the discussion. I've talked to people that I had no idea what Kaepernick was talking about. You know, I was with a group of people the other day. I was invited, and just to show you, and I understand this, I thought we were going to be talking about politics. That's what they told me. Well, the major concern was World War III, the possibility thereof. And this was a group of folks, normally mostly businessmen. And rather than talking politically about maybe the budget or whatever, something that's going to have an impact on the bottom line, they were talking about World War III and the possibility thereof. And I understood that, because you've got two, it's like the schoolyard guys. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm going to talk about you, you're going to talk about me. And, well, I won't get into this, because when you question me about what I think about our commander-in-chief, I mean.
well, let's go there. Let's go there for a second, because really what we're talking about, and we've talked about that on this show before, the First Amendment, our protections under the First Amendment says that the government cannot curtail our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, freedom to assembly.
Right.
So when Trump, as president from the Oval Office, says to the NFL, hey, these guys that are doing this action and they are expressing their First Amendment right, get those son of a bitches out of there and fire them. That's exactly what he's doing exactly the thing that the First Amendment says we have a protection from.
You're absolutely correct. You're right. And it just shows you that it shows you the extension of the ignorance of our commander-in-chief, which is very unfortunate. But you're right. You're absolutely correct.
Mr. Kelly, this is Atiba.
I tell you what I did tell these guys, if I may, because we had to break it up somehow with a little levity. And I told them that, thinking about back to World War III, I said, well, we went through this last missile crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Many people may not remember it. But I said I was in an office at the time when there was a sign on the wall that said, if you hear an air raid alert, push away from your desk, stand up, take off your jacket, unloosen your tie, unbutton your collar, and crawl under the desk and pull your knees up as far as you can and kiss your ass goodbye.
Well, you want to be well dressed if you're going to have to do that.
So everybody had that same reaction like you did. They laughed, and then kind of, because it was getting really bad. This was a couple of weeks ago, and Kim Jong-un and Trump, they were really going at it, and a lot of folks were really fearful of the fact that we were going to, hopefully, according to Tillerson, the Secretary of State, things, there's some back channel talks going on. But, we're talking about a guy that killed some of his family members to become the president in North Korea. And then you've got this guy here who obviously displays his lack of knowledge about even things that he swore to uphold. And it gets to be dangerous, as I say, like the school ground, you know what I'm talking about,
That's a very powerful word you just used there, Cliff. Dangerous. And I think that's not something that's usually a word that's associated with the president of the United States. And I don't know that I've ever seen a president characterized as dangerous as many times as I've heard it ascribed to the Trump administration. Let me get back to the veterans for a moment, though, if I could.
Sure, please.
You mentioned that we have over 20 veterans a day. I think people kind of lose that statistic. 20 veterans a day committing suicide. And when you think about that, and I'm not trying to be snide here, but let's be honest. I don't think not one of them are doing so because somebody knelt during the national anthem. I'm pretty sure that that's not the case. So if we love these veterans so much, if we love them so much, and we are so concerned about the veterans, and because here's what I get tired of. I get tired of Republicans using them as props. If you remember,
I love the way you say that.
If you remember during the RNC, there was the one family that they had brought up, and they brought the wife because the guy had just died and she was crying and all that. And all that stuff is fine and spectacular. But at the end of the day, can we have a real conversation about how it is we can help our veterans? When we look at the Republican healthcare plan, and every plan from the one that came through the House to the 3 that came through the Senate, every plan that they proposed hurt veterans severely. So I'm trying to understand how Republicans got to be the party of patriotism, and how they got to be the ones that a lot of people associate with supporting the military, when everything that they do from a policy perspective, almost everything that they do hurts them.
I can't add anything to what you're saying. I second the motion. As usual, you're right. You know what you're talking about. I had a personal experience a couple of weeks ago where a family that I know, a man and his wife, he just came back from his second tour of Afghanistan. I hadn't seen him. Well, I still haven't seen him, but I did see her. I ran into her, and of course, we were talking. And I said, "How is he?" And she looked at me and said, "Cliff, that's not my husband." This is terrible. And of course, we understand that. We understand what they denied about Agent Orange, all those numb that was wiping out all the foliage. Oh, that didn't make anybody sick. It's killing everything that's there. I mean, how could it not? You know how long it took them to admit that? Then you've got all these other things that are going on. Now, I will say this, because, the old saying again, even a broken clock is right twice a day. One thing Trump did, and it probably wasn't him that did it, is now ahead of the VA. Dr. Shelva is a good guy. He's a physician, and he said we have all kinds of problems with the VA. It's got to take some time to clean up. One of the people that he selected to be an assistant happens to be related to a friend of mine. The gentleman he selected is, and we've had him on the show, is an African-American physician on the East Coast. So they do realize the fact, and they're changing some of the regulations about how to get rid of people who aren't doing the job, who are really not helping the veterans, and that's their responsibility. So hopefully, this will work out so we can get some help for these people, because they deserve it. We owe it to them. That's the sort of thing we're talking about.
And when I'm listening to you, this is David speaking again, but as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about how the Pentagon, they just asked for 70 of the F-35s. Those F-35s are $1 billion each. The Trump administration overruled them and ordered 94. And the Pentagon said, whoa, we don't even need that many. All we need are 70. But as I was doing those numbers in my head, as I was reading that story, they ordered an additional 24 F-35s at $1 billion a pop. What could they have done with that additional $24 billion to help soldiers with PTSD, to open a new veterans facility, or to subsidize an existing hospital? The Republicans and they're really big on, let veterans go to any hospital. So that'll cut down on the wait time. But then they've got to fund that insurance. They got to fund the VA so that when they go to a private hospital, that those private hospitals are still going to get paid. I mean, there's so many other things they could have done just with that $24 billion. Again, is this just representative of bringing people from private industry into government who have absolutely no idea how to run it?
I think you're absolutely correct. Yeah. You should be there in Washington.
I mean, because again, you're being facetious, but again, I remember.
I'm not. What you're saying makes sense.
But
what you're saying makes sense.
Right, because I remember when Obama ran for president, and I'll be full disclosure, I kind of ascribe to this belief myself, but they were saying, hey, he's only been a senator for 2 years. He doesn't really have any experience. He doesn't really know how to run a federal agency. He's never been an executive. But now we have this guy who has zero public sector experience in Washington making these decisions, and he has absolutely no frame of reference other than being a private business holder when he didn't have shareholders to answer to, or he didn't have a board of directors to answer to. He could just make whatever decision that he wanted to make, and that's how he's running the government, and that's how the veterans continue to be maltreated.
Well, that's true, and we weren't even sure how good a businessman he was.
Exactly.
I don't know how many times he filed bankruptcy, and
Right.
of course that phony university he had got sued, and the fact that he is the only president that I know of in recent years who has not come up with his income tax, his internal revenue returns. You know,
Right.
he just refused. He refuses to do that. Now there are some people working on an issue. See, if the Congress, if the House was Democratic, of course, they could demand that he do that he come up with his tax returns. Of
Right.
course, it's Republican and they're not. However, there are many states where he has had information, done things when you have state income tax. You know what I mean? And if you have a House, a legislature, rather that's Democratic, they can demand that. There's some people working on that right now, so that may come up in some states where they can demand that he come up with a state income tax, which would tell us a lot too.
Right.
There's all kinds of things, and we don't know why he does some of the things he does. Just like you issuing all of that money, that goes, you know, he's got all kind of friends and so forth. He's doing things for. It's we've got major problems, and you know, and talking about this. He's great at taking things away from the real issue, which is what he's done with this, you know, the knee down. I mean, this has nothing to do with the things he's talking about.
Absolutely. He's the king of deflection and the king of distraction.
Exactly. Well stated. Well stated.
Well, let me ask you this, because, you know, I'm all for the veterans today. That's really what this segment is about. Aside from standing for the anthem, and aside from saying thank you for your service when you see somebody in uniform, what are the things substantively that we can do to support our vets? Where do they need the most help?
I'm sorry, say that again. What's the last part you said?
Where do our veterans need the most help? How can we help them the most? Where can we help them the most?
You mean the soldiers?
Yes, soldiers. Where do they need the most help? How can we help our soldiers?
Right. They need the most help primarily with reserve outfits. Once I left active duty, I was a reservist for some years. But the military is doing extremely well relative to trying to make people understand why they're there, what they're doing. There's a few things they have done that I don't like. When I was growing up, we had young men who really didn't have too much going for them. And they were able to get into the military, and with a lot of those guys, it really helped them tremendously. You know, they learned a whole lot of things and became good citizens after they left the service. Now you can't get into the service without a high school diploma.
Right.
I think that's a step backwards. I think because now it might be because of the technical things you have to learn. There may be some, I'm sure, reason for that, but I'm sorry to see that happen. One thing I'm glad to see happen is, in fact, we got into this discussion on the Veteran Show a few weeks ago about women in combat. And, there are a lot of folks that say, oh, no. I said, I don't have a problem with that at all. You've got women finishing Ranger School. Now, any woman who can get through Ranger School, I would not have any problem with serving next to her. And I said, in my years, some of the meanest people I have known have been women. They will kick your ass, you know.
That's right.
and something else that's wonderful, you know, the U.S. Military Academy, West Point, the best 4,100 cadets. Do you know who the cadet captain is?
No.
A black woman.
Nice. Isn't
that great?
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about, is progress. You know,
exactly.
There are so many things that we had preconceived notions about that would be problems, whether it's gay marriage, whether it's women serving in the military, whether it's gays in the military, and all those things have just proven to be unfounded. And we've been able, and that's what it's about, is making progress and inclusion. So time is against us, Mr. Kelly, but we definitely want to thank you for joining us today. If you want to go ahead and please give a quick shout out to your already popular radio show so people know where they can hear more of you.
You're great. You're great, as you always have been.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Cliff Kelly, and WVON every day, Monday through Friday, the Cliff Kelly Show from 3 to 6 p.m. And on Saturday, the America's Heroes group, which is strictly about veterans, and that's from 4 to 5 on Saturday. And I want to thank you so much for inviting me on. You're great. You were my best intern.
Well, thank you, sir.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you, man. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and you're always welcome to come back.
Thank you so much. Let's talk again soon.
You got it.
All right.
Cliff Kelly, VON, WVON, Chicago, the venerable,
the governor.
The governor.
That's right. So now you guys know why. But again, I hope you enjoyed today's show. I do want to. We got a few minutes left,
right?
So we can still talk about Puerto Rico a little bit.
Sure.
If you want to pull up some of those doggone tweets again,
tweets,
man.
From
what is up with Trump and Saturday mornings?
Friday. We can't forget Friday nights. Last night, Tom Price, HHS secretary, got let go.
Finally. And can I tell you? I'm glad you brought that up. Can I tell you what annoys me about that? Besides the blatant hypocrisy of what he did, he really didn't get fired because of what he did. Because Trump couldn't. He doesn't have the moral authority to fire him over what he did. Doesn't have a moral objection to what he did. He fired him because it was bad press and it was bad headlines. That's why he got rid of him, because if anybody's going to provide the distraction in this administration, it's going to be Donald Trump, not anyone else.
His most recent tweet, 47 minutes ago, despite the fake news media in conjunction with the Dems, an amazing job is being done in Puerto Rico. Great people. Then before that, the fake news networks are working overtime in Puerto Rico, doing the best to take the spirit away from our soldiers and first responders. Shame. Now, I've watched the coverage on CNN and on MSNBC. I don't watch Fox News at all, unless I'm trying to test if my blood pressure, see how quickly it can go up within 120 seconds. But the only thing that they've been doing is they're down there and they're interviewing the people who are on the ground and asking them, getting real-time assessments from the residents of Puerto Rico and getting their feedback. And all they're hearing is, it's not happening fast enough. We're still in these dire straits. We don't have clean drinking water. We don't have food. We don't have refrigeration for medicine. There have been stories going on every day that they are going to ice houses that to buy ice, that people need this ice to keep their medicine cold, like insulin, to keep that cold because they don't have electricity.
Power. And
the bottom line is that it's just another example of a slow-footed, slow response to a group of people that just so happen to be black and brown.
Hey, you can't blame them. They're in the middle of all that big water.
Right.
Ocean
water.
Roads.
There's no roads to get to.
Did you hear that? He said big water, ocean water. I mean, I again, and it was so funny because I watched the clip and you should see the lady's face behind him. Oh my goodness. I just do not understand. All I can say is about the Trump presidency. Shame on America for putting that man in office. Our hearts go out to the people of Puerto Rico who, I feel disgusted having to say this, are American citizens who do not have representation, by the way, because they are colonized. That's a U.S. territory. So they don't have senators. They don't have Congress people. They can't vote in the presidential election. Did you guys know that? So that's what they're dealing with. They're dealing with really taxation without representation because they're paying taxes. But
here's the other thing.
They have no representation, and now you're getting to see the results of that.
And here's the other thing, and I want people to pay attention to this because this is going to, I guarantee you, this is going to be an issue between now and 2020. So we're voted to become America's 51st state. But after the response to this response from Hurricanes Irma and Maria, if I was a resident of Puerto Rico, I'd be asking myself, why do I want to become the 51st state of the United States if they're treating us like this now?
Right.
That's going to be a big. There's going to be some sort of some sort of fight that's ensuing where Puerto Rico is going to vote to separate from the United States. Because if you've been hearing about all these issues with the ports, and I won't bore everybody with the laws and the names of the laws, but been hearing all these issues about the ships can't get in unless they have an American flag and
Right.
all these other issues. And so Puerto Ricans, just because of that United States law, are paying twice as much for everything that gets shipped over to that island. They're going to probably take a hard look at that and make an economic decision that it probably is more beneficial to just go ahead and just separate from the United States, even as a territory.
Absolutely. Well, we are out of time, good people. We hope you enjoyed the show with our good man, Cliff Kelly. We thank him for being on, and Miss Monique Judge from The Root. Everybody, be safe, be aware, be informed. And we thank you so much for watching and listening to Humanity in the Headlines.
Shout out to Breon Jones,
Shout out to Breon Jones for producing a great show. And
shout out to Earl Winfrey, as always.
Absolutely.
The coolest jazz tracks in America. If you did want to find those, hit this man up.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week with another great show. Thanks for watching Humanity in the Headlines. Be blessed, everybody.